The world of the Yakuza games is filled with memorable characters, but with so many games and so many names, it can be hard to keep track of everything. In this series, I will attempt to give full accounts of what happened to some of my favorite characters, starting with a fan favorite. Anyone who's walked the streets of Kamurocho will recognize the signature eye patch, the snakeskin jacket, and the maniacal laugh. This is the story of the Mad Dog of Shimano. This is the story of Majima Goro. Two things real quick before we start this video. There's going to be spoilers for every single mainline Yakuza game, and also that is not going to be the main focus. So we are not going to delve into the specifics of every single story. We are only going to talk about what pertains to Majima. So without further ado, let's get into it. Chronologically, the first time we see Majima is during the events recounted in Yakuza 4, where he and Saejima are getting ready to take on the Ueno Seiwa hit. At this point, he is already Kyodai, or Oath Brothers, with Saejima, and is a member of the Shimano family. The plan is to assassinate the Ueno Seiwa chairman in order to promote the Sasai family, who Saejima belonged to at the time. Majima buys some guns off the Dojima, but little do they know that each of these guns is actually loaded with rubber bullets. On the day of the hit, one of the Dojima higher-ups, Kazuo Shibata, orders Majima not to carry out the hit. Majima refuses to put his brother's life in danger by not helping and attempts to go anyway, but is overpowered and tied up. He continues to resist, and as a result, he loses his left eye before being left to the mercy of his boss, Futoshi Shimano. Now, while all this is going on, Saejima is still carrying out the hit under the impression that Majima simply abandoned him. He ends up getting sentenced to life in prison for the crime, as at this point we don't know the bullets were rubber yet. As punishment for his insubordination, Majima is put in a Yakuza black site prison called The Hole, where most people end up getting tortured to death. Majima refuses to break, and eventually Shimano decides to release him into the custody of his Kyodai, or Oath Brother, in the Omi Alliance, whose name is Tsugasa Sagawa. Now, Sagawa holds Majima captive in Sotenbori, keeping him under heavy surveillance and tasking him with raising 100 million yen as the manager of the Cabaret Grand in order to get back into the Tojo clan. All sets up the events of Yakuza 0, where we get to play Majima while he runs his club and runs around Sotenbori finding answers. One night, Majima gets an unruly drunk in his establishment, and after dealing with it in one of the best cutscenes to grace a video game, Sagawa decides to raise his mark to 500 million yen. At the same time, he gives Majima another option. Pull off a hit, and the debt will be wiped immediately. Majima reluctantly agrees to murder someone by the name of Makoto Makimura, but at this point he has no idea who this person might be. It's also important to note here that Majima has no idea that Sagawa and Shimano are Kyodai. Sagawa tells Majima that Makoto is a ruthless pimp and he forces college girls to work at a phone club for him, hoping that Majima will feel justified in his actions this way. Majima heads to the telephone club to find information on Makoto, learning that he works at a massage parlor called Hogushi Kaiken. Majima heads there, ready to kill, but finds the place empty. Shortly after, someone walks in, and he attempts to hide when he notices this person is blind, but he ultimately fails, and the woman starts yelling, saying he's a thief. In order to get her to calm down, Majima says he's a customer and he's there to get a massage. Majima falls asleep, only to wake up to the sound of Makoto walking in. The man recognizes Majima as a Yakuza, sends out the woman, and the two start fighting. After some more confusion with the Omi showing up, it is revealed that the real Makoto was the girl all along. The Omi shoot the man, whose real name is Wenhai Lee, and they kidnap Makoto. Majima tracks her down and sneaks her away. But as she is clinging to his leg, and he's looking down the edge of his knife blade, he finds he can't bring himself to do it. Majima then brings Makoto to a storage shed, hoping to find out more about what's going on. Turns out Makoto used to be a trafficking victim, and the resulting psychological trauma is what caused her to go blind. Wenhai Lee is the man who rescued her, took her in, and gave her a job. It's at this point Majima notices her watch, makes a comment on it, and she throws it away. Majima decides to pick it up and pocket it for later. This will be very important, and it's an amazing story. Majima meets up with Lee, who has a plan to get them all out of Sotenbori. Lee figures if they can kill a body double of Makoto, they might get everyone off their trail enough to head out of the city undetected. He even has a uniform ready, and pictures of a suitable target, which he gives to Majima. Majima is not down for this, and even fights Lee to stop him from doing it himself. Later, Majima discards the uniform and pictures in a random trash can, but it turns out this was a big mistake, as the next day he sees the murder carried out anyway on TV. A man named Nishitani rents out the Grand and calls Majima, revealing that it was him who carried out the murder. Majima shows up and they inevitably fight. Nishitani reveals that there are two sides to this conflict, and he is trying to bring Makoto back to his benefactor in the Tojo clan before Sagawa can have her killed. After the fight, Sagawa gets sus about the hit, saying Majima was careless. Majima dismisses him and heads back to the warehouse, only for Sagawa's men to show up shortly afterward. Now, if you were paying attention while playing the game, these are the same people that Majima sees out of his window earlier. He fights the men off and the three attempt to escape Sotenbori, but unfortunately the van they go to use has a bomb planted inside it. This ends up killing Lee and incapacitating Majima and Makoto. Sagawa walks up, ready to shoot them both, when a mysterious man arrives and shoots Sagawa in the back. He then pistol whips Majima and takes Makoto to safety. Now this man is none other than Masaru Sera, but Majima does not know that at the time. With Lee dead and Sera and Makoto gone, Majima is left at the mercy of the now wounded and angry Sagawa, who takes him to another warehouse to be chained up again. These guys really have a thing for the tie you up and beat you within an inch of your life shtick. After being tortured some more, Sagawa spares Majima, saying he's the only one who can get more information on Makoto now. At this point, their only real lead near Sotenbori is Nishitani. Eventually, Majima tracks him down in a jail cell and meets with him. Nishitani is kinda crazy, and he likes Majima, so he ends up telling him everything he knows about Makoto's situation. This is where Majima learns about Sera and the Nikio Consortium as well as their location. Eventually, it comes time to leave, but nobody is answering. The guard that was bribed turns traitor, and Nishitani dies rushing the man and shielding Majima from gunfire. This isn't the only time this happens in the game, either. Rest in peace, Nishitani. Majima flees and makes it back to Sotenbori, but not long after Sagawa finds him. He's pretty pissed Majima left town, but at least he got some useful information. Armed with what they believe is the location of Makoto, the two head to a brothel called Camellia Grove. Eventually, Majima confronts Sera, who reveals that he left Makoto in the care of a certain real estate agent whose business card is in Sera's pocket. Majima decides not to kill Sera, but Sagawa shows up and shoots the man anyway. They take the business card, and the name is none other than Kazuma Kiryu. Two head to Kamurocho to track down Makoto, and upon arrival, Majima is told to meet up with his boss, Shimano. It's at this point that Shimano reveals to Majima that him and Sagawa are Kyodai, and the hit on Makoto was Shimano's idea all along. You see, the whole plot of Yakuza 0 revolves around a plot of land called the Empty Lot. Basically, everyone wants this piece of land so they can revitalize Kamurocho, but Makoto is the one who owns the deed of the land. That's why all these gangsters have been after her all this time. He mentions that he never actually intended for Majima to kill Makoto, as he didn't think he would be able to go through with it, and all he wanted was for her to give the land over willingly with Majima's help. Hearing that Shimano ordered the hit just to humiliate Majima further, he gets depressed and just kind of lets these guys beat the shit out of him on the street. He decides to take matters into his own hands now and goes off to fight both Kashiwagi and Nishikiyama to get more information on Makoto. Side note, these are really cool fights. Eventually, he finds Makoto, whose sight is slowly starting to return, and she tells Majima about the torture and death of her brother, who is the owner of Tachibana Real Estate, which is the company that Kiryu works for in this game, at the hands of Dojima's lieutenants, and how she wants revenge. All you really need to know for now is that the Dojima are a Tojo clan Yakuza family that are vying for power at this point. Majima says he is not down, but the two go out for takoyaki still. Makoto decides to go meet with the Dojima on her own, and tells Sohei that she will give him the land if he gives her the heads of his 3 lieutenants. Obviously, he's not gonna do this, and decides to simply have her shot instead. Majima bursts in right as this happens, and the shooter, the 3 lieutenants, and Sohei all run away like little bitches. Guess they can't handle that breaker style. Turns out Sera didn't die, and he shows up after Majima kicks some ass and ends up saving Makoto. These people are all bad shots, I guess. They all rush to the hospital, and it becomes clear at this point that Majima really cares about this woman. He decides to go after the Dojima. If she wants revenge, she'll get it, no matter what. I really like this scene, where he gets revenge on the guys that kicked him while he was down as well. Sagawa runs into Majima here, and Majima finally takes a stand for himself, and this scene is great. I love to see it. This is also the first time we hear his iconic name used, where Sagawa says, "You've got the eye of a mad dog." Now ready to kick some ass, Majima heads to the Dojima office and fights his way through all the thugs to Awano. A really touching moment where Majima is able to get through to Awano, and Awano actually ends up sacrificing himself, a lot like Nishitani did earlier, and jumping in front of a bullet, actually several, for Majima. Majima then beats the nasty assassin guy Lao Gui and is about to kill him and Dojima when Sera shows up and asks him if that's what he really wants. In the heat of the moment, he says yes, but he is then reminded of how the hit Saejima had to carry out alone still affects Majima to this day. Realizing he doesn't want to make Makoto go through this kind of thing, and that Sera is now the owner of the land, so she's no longer in danger, Majima changes his mind. Sera then asks Majima to kill Shimano for betraying the Tojo clan, but as we'll see, things don't go exactly according to that plan. Majima heads to his boss's office, gives Shimano an ultimatum, and sets the gun on the table, stating that he's a family man either way. At the time, Shimano is actually meeting with an Omi delegate, and after some consideration, he shoots the man, which signifies his return to loyalty to the Tojo clan. Back at Tojo headquarters, Sera is appointed clan captain, and we can physically see Dojima's anger at his humiliation here. We cut back to Majima, and he's meeting with Sagawa for the final time. During this scene, Sagawa lights Majima's cigarette, which is some great symbolism showing that the two are equals now. Majima says he will live his own way now, and walks away, not knowing that as he turns the corner, Sagawa's past is going to catch up to him. This is the last time we see Sagawa. Afterwards, Majima runs into Makoto again, who is being harassed by some of his fellow thugs. He saves her, but doesn't say anything, as he doesn't want to reveal his identity to her. There's a really touching moment where he brings her guy to the side and makes sure that he cares about her and really loves her and tells him that he better take care of her. Later on, we see a scene where Makoto goes to the empty lot, supposedly to mourn her brother, and hears a soft song. Digging in the dirt, she sees the watch that she left earlier. Majima had it fixed and returned it to her. This is just one of the many moments in the series that just makes me cry every time I go back to it. We are now at the end of Yakuza 0, and Majima has made his transformation into the Mad Dog of Shimano. Things will be a little bit more spaced out now, as Majima is not a playable character in any of the other mainline games, yet. Interestingly, the next events chronologically are actually covered in Yakuza 5, and they concern what happened to Majima between the events of Yakuza 0 and Yakuza 1. Now, after this whole empty lot incident, Majima becomes friends with a man named Naoki Katsuya, and he marries a woman named Mireille Park, who is an aspiring idol. The three together decide to form Osaka Talent in 1992, which is an entertainment production company. Soon after the formation of Osaka Talent, however, Majima learns that Park had a baby aborted and never told him about it. This makes Majima extremely angry, and he even hits her, and then they end up breaking up. Which leads us to the events of Yakuza Kiwami. Real quick, if you guys want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. I make all of this by myself and it takes a lot of time, so any support is much appreciated. Back to the video. Majima's role in this game is much smaller, as it was technically the first time the character was introduced, and at this point he was still just a side character. Our first encounter with him is the iconic scene of him beating his subordinate with the umbrella, and Kiryu stopping him before it gets out of hand. The next time Kiryu sees him is when he gets out of the joint.
10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy!
And Majima attacks him to see how much has changed in that time. Later in the game, Majima kidnaps Haruka to try and lure Kiryu out to fight, but he does let him know that Haruka is safe. Majima always has this kind of underlying, he's a crazy bastard that wants to fight, but he's still kind of a good guy thing. It's really weird. Majima also helps Kiryu out at the wharf later in the game, and has his iconic Shangri-La battle, but there's not much actual story in this game for our boy. There's also the Majima Everywhere from Kiwami, but that doesn't add a lot of story either. The only other playable instance of Majima is in the Majima Saga, which is add-on content for Kiwami 2. And the events of this mostly take place before Kiwami 2, so we will be discussing those first. Arata is now the chairman of the Tojo clan, and there is a power struggle for clan captain. Majima decides to run, but not to win, just to make the running more unbiased and fair. The main power struggle is between two captains, Uematsu and Ibuchi. After being attacked by what he assumes are Uematsu's men, Majima heads to the Uematsu office. There he finds the man dead with a bullet in his head. When Majima returns to clan headquarters to tell everyone, Ibuchi uses the opportunity to try and blame the murder on Majima himself. Majima goes to find proof to clear his name, and he does. Turns out the Florist of Sai has some footage of who actually killed Uematsu, and it was none other than one of Majima's subordinates, Kawamura, who was last seen in Sotenbori. In exchange for this information, Majima has to run purgatory while the florist is gone. He heads to Sotenbori to get some information, stopping at the Grand while he's there. He finds out that Kawamura has been frequenting a mahjong parlor that happens to be above Hogushi Kaiken, that massage parlor from Yakuza 0. Majima goes there to get some information, but instead ends up getting talked into a massage. Again, this feels familiar. Makoto ends up walking in, and Majima hides his face, but can't stop glancing at her watch. Makoto notices this, and recounts the story of Majima fixing it and giving it back to her, not knowing that the man she so desperately wants to thank is right there in front of her. On the way out, Makoto asks if they've met before. Majima says no, but admits that she worked out some knots that he's had for 18 years. This line really gave me the chills. Majima gets a call from the Grand saying Kawamura showed up and shot an Omi member at the club, and Majima heads over. Kawamura reveals that he needed to kill both Majima and Uematsu in order to gain his freedom, but before Majima can find out more, Ibuchi shoots him and admits that it was him who paid off Kawamura's debts to buy his loyalty. Majima beats Ibuchi as well, but Ibuchi decides to kill himself before the Popo show up. Majima returns to clan headquarters and tells Terada everything that happened, offering to disband the Majima clan in order to make reparations to the Omi and prevent a war. They meet with Jin Goda and the rest of the Omi, and although many of the lieutenants would prefer war, Jin Goda accepts the terms. Majima dissolves the Majima family at this point and creates Majima Construction, who begin their work on Kamurocho Hills above Purgatory. Later on, we see that Majima got a new strap for Makoto's watch, and she realizes that it was him that day in the parlor, and she did get the chance to finally thank him. I don't know what it is about this whole Makoto-Majima relationship with the watch thing, but it gets me really emotional. It's really beautiful. Probably my favorite little side story within Yakuza. But anyway, on to the events of Yakuza 2. Tojo clan is struggling under Terada's leadership, and Kiryu heads to Purgatory to get a hold of our mad lad, and he recounts the events of the last year or so to Kiryu. Turns out Kashiwagi is clan captain now, but Terada has him heavily sidelined and basically just does whatever he wants. Majima Construction gets attacked at this point, and in exchange for helping them defend themselves, Majima agrees to help the Tojo clan when the time comes. Majima shows up later to single-handedly take out all of Sengoku's men, but not without being gravely injured and needing treatment from Kaoru. After recovering, Majima helps disarm some bombs in the city with the help of his trusty crew. And that's basically it for Yakuza 2. Now on to Yakuza 3. At the beginning of the game, Kiryu plans on leaving to Okinawa, and he has a meeting with Majima on top of the Millennium Tower. Here, Kiryu asks Majima to go back to the Tojo clan and help Daigo lead, but Majima says he will only be swayed by strength. Kiryu proceeds to beat the shit out of him, and Majima promises to return to the Tojo clan. Throughout the game, Majima Construction will continue its work on Kamurocho Hills. Later on in the game, Date suspects that Majima is the traitor in the clan, but Kiryu doesn't believe it and heads to Purgatory to confront him. Once again, Majima says he will only answer Kiryu's questions if Kiryu beats him in a fight. Typical Majima. After losing again, Majima reveals that he has been blackmailed by Hamazaki. The two find out that Kanda is dead and Hamazaki family is no more. So with Kashiwagi also out of the picture at this point, Kiryu asks Majima to help lead the Kazama family. Majima shows up later in the game to save Kiryu at the Diet Building, and that's about all that happens in the third game for our boy. On to the fourth entry. Now, Yakuza 4 was the first game where they really started to delve a bit more into Majima and Saijima's storylines. Remember that Zero didn't release until after Yakuza 5? And in this game, Majima hears wind of Yasuko, who is Saijima's sister, and tracks her down in hopes of finding out what happened to his brother. He sends his lackey to Akiyama's club Elise, but is ultimately unsuccessful at gaining any information. Later, he hears of Saijima's arrival in Kamurocho, and arranges a meeting at the batting cages so the two can fight. After Saijima wins, Majima recounts what happened the day of the Ueno Seiwa hit, putting to rest any suspicions Saijima might have had of his Kyodai betraying him while he was in prison. Later on, Majima gets arrested and asks Kiryu to help Yasuko. Even though we saw Majima get arrested, we later see him at Saijima's inauguration when he becomes a leader of his own Yakuza family, so he must have gotten out somehow. But with Saijima now a captain of his own clan, we can head to the events of Yakuza 5. Majima and Saijima are just hanging out, eating some food, having some good talks, and Saijima tells Majima that he's planning to go back to prison. Naturally, this prompts Majima to sick his boys on Saijima in order to test his strength. Majima is then sent to Hokkaido to negotiate with the Kitakata family, as part of Daigo's plan to improve the Tojo clan's relations and avoid war with the Omi alliance. While there, Majima gets tipped off by his friend in the Omi that the 5th chairman, Tsubasa Kurosawa, wants to assassinate him. With Patriarch Kitakata's help, Majima fakes his own murder, but ends up getting wounded still. Majima escapes and pursues Kurosawa, who takes advantage of the opportunity and gets Majima's death showcased in all of the newspapers. His goal here is twofold: demoralize the Tojo, and goad Kiryu into attacking and starting a war with the Omi alliance. Also Saijima by extension. Saijima hears of his Kyodai's death and breaks out of prison in order to learn the truth. With everyone thinking his death, Majima tries to use the opportunity to contact his ex-wife and Katsuya, who we talked about before with Osaka Talent. Katsuya has healthy ties to the Omi at this point. The letter he sends to Park ends up getting her killed by none other than the traitor him and Katsuya were trying to lure out the whole time. Majima hides out in the Millennium Tower, but Kurosawa ends up finding him there and uses Haruka's life as leverage to capture Majima. He then forces Saijima and Majima to fight to the death, but the two simply fight to a stalemate to buy enough time for Shinada to subdue the sniper aiming at Haruka. At this point, Daigo and Katsuya arrive and save the brothers, bringing us to the events of Yakuza 6. Beginning of the game, we see the two brothers waiting outside Kiryu's hospital room. The police show up to take Saijima back to jail, and Majima starts to protest, but Saijima insists, saying he has to do his time so he can truly live as a free man. When the Little Asia fire happens, Daigo and Majima get blamed and arrested. Kiryu bargains for their release in 2017. After Kiryu quote-unquote dies, Majima asks Daigo how the clan should react to the Yomei Alliance's apparent murder of Kiryu. Dojima then shows Majima a letter from Kiryu, stating that he wishes to avoid war with the Yomei. The three head back to the Tojo clan until the events of Like a Dragon. Tojo are now a major target of Governor Ryo Aoki and his initiative to stamp out crime in the city. The three Tojo leaders, Dojima, Majima, and Saijima, aka 3Jima, all meet with Arakawa to hatch a plan to protect the clan. Arakawa leaks this info to the cops to ensure the success of the plan, and the three go into hiding. Later, while the four are all meeting up again in Omi Alliance HQ, Kasuga and friends show up. They mistake Majima and Saijima for Omi officers, and since the boys are itching for a fight, they don't bother correcting them. After a long and pretty difficult fight, Majima and Saijima say they're going to stop holding back, but Daigo and Arakawa step in and let everyone know they're actually on the same side. During the dissolution of the clans, we can see Majima protecting Daigo and Watase, and he gets hella hyped up when he sees Kiryu-chan. In Like a Dragon Gaiden, Majima invites everyone to party after this scene, but he gets turned down by Joryu. Majima agrees to play along with this for now. Majima and Saijima help keep Shishido's men busy while Kiryu fights him. At Arakawa and Ryo Aoki's funeral at the end of the game, we hear of Dojima, Majima, and Saijima's plans to open an actual, real, legitimate security firm business, but this will quickly get shut down in the events of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Now we are at the most recent entry in the franchise, and it has been quite a journey. The security company our boys set up gets shut down by the slander of the Totoro channel, and they are forced to go live in a remote fishing village as they believe their presence in a major city could be enough to incite the Tojo clan to rise up again. Kiryu and friends show up eventually and tell everyone the situation. Majima is visibly disturbed by the reveal of Kiryu's cancer, but he offers him a drink anyway. Kiryu asks for help against Ebina, but they refuse. This prompts Kiryu to insult their pride, and in typical Yakuza fashion, everyone starts fighting. They fight to a draw, and Kiryu asks for help one more time, telling them to take responsibility for their actions and leaving. Eventually, this advice does get to them, and they head to the Millennium Tower during the finale to help Kiryu and friends. Saijima shoots a rocket launcher at a helicopter like a badass, and the three help Kiryu fight off some Omi officers. They hold them off while Kiryu heads up to fight Ebina. Shortly after Kiryu defeats Ebina, the three burst through the doors and Majima screams Kiryu's name as he passes out. As of now, that's basically it. Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is coming out pretty soon, and I hope we can see some more development of this amazing character. These games are massive, and I'm sure I missed some things and little details, maybe got some things wrong, so please chime in the comments. Tell me what other characters and topics you'd like to see me cover. I'm open to any kind of advice, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you all so much.